How do you build a culture, given that we would be spread far and wide, that people would be empowered to make decisions and feel like they were part of something?
Welcome to the podcast about communication in business. I'm your host, George Torok. Did you know that I'm known as the speech coach for executives? That's because I help business leaders deliver the intended message for greater success. And we do that through one-on-one coaching or group training for the team. When you listen to this podcast, you will hear insights and perspective from communication experts from around the world. I'm delighted today to introduce my guest, Garry Ridge. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about Garry. 1, during his leadership at WD-40 Company, remember that one, squirt, WD-40? Garry Ridge built one of the world's most admired workplace cultures, achieving over 90% employee engagement and consistent shareholder growth for more than a decade. Imagine that, keeping both the shareholders happy and the employees happy. That's quite a balance. 2, he's the USA Today best-selling author of Any Dumb Ass Can Do It, and co-author of Helping People Win at Work with Ken Blanchard. Garry taught corporate culture at the University of San Diego's Master of Science in Executive Leadership program and holds an honorary doctorate of humane letters from National University, recognizing his lifelong contributions to servant leadership and workplace culture. And 3, Garry calls himself the Dean of Dumbassery, reminding leaders everywhere that learning starts with humility. His mission to help people build workplaces where love, forgiveness, and learning inspire a happier, more connected world. Garry Ridge, welcome to Your Intended Message.
G'day, George. What a pleasure to be with you. And when you read all that, I'm saying, who's he really talking about there? Is that really me?
That's really you, yes, and it's always wonderful when we put it all together like that. Garry, the book Any Dumbass Can Do It. Clearly the title is catchy, but what did you really mean by that?
Well, thanks for asking, George. As you know, I'm an Aussie, an Australian, even though I live in the United States now. And the word ASS in Australia does not particularly refer to someone's bottom or posterior. Now, in this case, sure, the title was to get people's attention, but what I was really doing was emphasizing the leadership attributes of a donkey. Now, donkeys get a bad rap. People think they're just stubborn or slow, but I'd love to share with you some of the truths about a donkey. Donkeys are
Yes,
steady. They keep going long after others give up, George. They're loyal companions. You can count on them when the road gets tough. They're practical, not flashy. They know how to conserve energy and to get the job done. And while they might not always rush into things, George, that caution often keeps them safe. So when I say any dumbass can do it, what I really mean is you don't have to be brilliant to be a great leader. You just need a bit of courage, a lot of care, and the humility to keep learning. Because, like the donkey, leadership isn't about showing off. It's about carrying the load, sticking with the journey, and helping others get to where they need to go.
wow, Garry, we could almost just cut the interview right there, and we'd have some powerful lessons right in what you've said there. And I wonder how many people have actually thought about the lessons of leadership that we could learn from the donkey. But yet, when you put it that way, it's clear. I see the value in that. Garry, in your experience with WD-40, at what point did you become the donkey?
Oh, yeah, that's a great question. I started with WD-40 in 1987 down in Australia, and I moved to the US in 1994 to head up our international expansion program. And then in 1997, the then CEO decided to retire, and for some reason, the board of directors of a US public company thought this dumbass from Australia might be okay. And, I knew with the help of the team how we could make the brand famous around the world. But what was really on my mind, George, was how do you build a culture, given that we would be spread far and wide, that people would be empowered to make decisions and feel like they were part of something? Now, I really didn't know how to do that. And it was swimming in my head. And there was kind of an aha moment. I was traveling on a Qantas 747 from Los Angeles to Sydney, somewhere over the South Pacific Ocean at 2 a.m. in the morning at 38,000 feet. And as you do when you're flying, you take stuff to read. And I read a quote from the Dalai Lama, and it said, "Our purpose in life is to make people happy. If we can't make them happy, at least don't hurt them." And I thought, what a great thing to think about in an organization. And then I read a second quote from Aristotle, and that said, "Pleasure in the job puts perfection in the work." And I went, yes, how simple is that? If people enjoyed what they were doing, they'd really do it better. I still didn't know how to do it. But these things were swimming around in my head. I got back to San Diego after the journey down to Australia, and I was reading something in a local newspaper about a Master of Science in Executive Leadership degree at the University of San Diego, and it intrigued me. So I went to an information session, and Dr. Ken Blanchard, who later became my mentor and my dear friend and co-author, was speaking about the importance of getting people in the heart, not just get in the head. And that's what the whole basis of this program was about. So I said, I need to go back to school. I need to confirm what I think I know and learn what I don't know. So I was CEO of a US public company, and I enrolled in a master's program. And for the next 2 years, I went to school every month, and I learned the attributes of donkey leadership, if you will. Now, a lot of what I had thought I knew, I did know. But what this program did reinforce that for me. So it was around 1999 when I finished the program that I really hopped on the donkey.
The phrase that we don't know what we don't know, was that something that concept, was that something that you readily accepted, or did you struggle with that? Because you just been made leader of the company, international leader, and you're expected to know things. And when you show up, they're looking, okay, what's he got for us today? And were you prepared to accept that you didn't know what you didn't know, or did you think, damn it, I know everything?
Oh, I was far from knowing everything. And that's really the power of dumbassery. I used to introduce myself, George, like this. "G'day, I'm Garry Ridge. I'm the consciously incompetent, probably wrong and roughly right, chairman and CEO of WD-40 Company, and I need all the help I can get." Because any leader who thinks they know it all is doing something that they don't realize, but they're locking out the vast amount of knowledge and experience that's around them. Their job is to unlock all of that experience and knowledge from the people around them. So the three most powerful words I ever learned in my life were, "I don't know."
I don't know. And that's probably something that most of us need to admit more often, because until we say, I don't know, I don't think we're ready to learn.
Exactly. There was a great book written called "Who Moved My Cheese?" And there was a follow-on from that was that was titled "Out of the Maze." And there's a wonderful learning in that. And there's a question in there that's even as good as "I don't know," which is, why do I believe what I believe? And I think if leaders were to ask themselves more often, why do I believe that to be true? And be comfortable with the three words, "I don't know," that really opens up a well of curiosity, and then inviting people around them. Just because we don't know, it doesn't mean that we can't find out. So, I used to love it when we would say, we don't really have the answer to that, but boy, oh boy, we can really find the answer, and we can work hard to learn from this, because leaders need to be forever learners. The number one responsibility of a leader is to be a forever learner and a forever teacher, George. That's what it's all about.
Forever learner and forever teacher. What a noble role to play in any organization. And did people find you strange with that approach?
Oh, yeah, of course. Well, they find me strange anyhow. Yeah, I think that, remember, I'm talking, 25 years ago around this concept of servant leadership and culture. And, back then we were just recovering from the age of, let's fire the bottom 25 people in the organization and, that whole fear-based culture. And, so it took a little while for people to actually, trust that what we were really trying to do was to bring out the best in others. Our role, not only are we a learner and a teacher, but our role also is to be a great coach for those that we have the privilege to lead. And I really dislike the word manager, George. The word manager, in some dictionaries, the definition is manipulator. And, we're not there to manage people. We're there to manage inventory and, our bank account and the balance sheet. Our role is to be a coach. And we actually removed the word manager from our vocabulary, and we said everybody here is a coach, not a manager. And a great coach is committed to helping the player get an A. The book that I wrote with Ken, helping people helping people win at work, the byline was, I'm not here to mark your paper, I'm here to help you get an A. So the number one responsibility is a great coach is committed to helping the player get an A. A great coach is brave, not protecting their own comfort zone at the expense of other people's growth. A great coach knows the game and what it takes to win. A great coach does not run onto the field and take the ball. They spend a lot of time on the sideline watching the play. They add value to the player with feedback on how to improve the play. They never, ever, ever, ever go to the podium and steal the prize from the player. And a lot of leaders do that. And probably equally or mostly important is they spend a lot of time in what I call the stinky locker room building trust, which means they're out there alongside those players, feeling the game with them, understanding the hurdles, and really building trust and building psychological safety with the team. So a great leader is not only a leader, but they're a coach.
You mentioned Ken Blanchard was a mentor to you. Is he the one that made the biggest difference in your following this philosophy? And was it a transition for you? Was it like you getting a slap on the head and say, "Oh, yes, that's a good idea"?
Without doubt, he was probably the most influential. He was my professor at USD when I did that program, or one of the professors. And I was privileged enough, and a couple of years later, to be invited to be on the board of his company. So for 10 years, I sat in the Blanchard Company boardroom and was able to further, get that osmosis of learning around servant leadership. So I think the theory of what servant leadership could be was kind of a bit of a slap on the face, but then learning all the attributes was really important.
What are some of the relevant attributes of servant leadership?
Well, I'll talk a minute about what servant leadership isn't. And in my book, I'll just reach over here, I talk about this person. This is Alec, or Alice, the soul-sucking CEO of Fear Incorporated. And let's talk about some of their behaviors first that create these toxic cultures. Firstly, they have a big ego. Their ego eats their empathy instead of their empathy eating their ego. They're micromanagers. They think they're corporate royalty. They want a fear-based culture. They're a master of control. They're a know-it-all. They have all the answers, even the wrong ones. They don't necessarily value learning. They must always be right. Oh my God, they hate feedback. And they don't necessarily keep all their commitments. On the flip side, though, if you're a servant-based leader, number one is you love and involve your people. You must always be in servant leadership mode, which means being a forever learner and a forever teacher and a forever coach. You're expected to be competent, and you love learning. You're connected, spending time in that stinky locker room. You love learning moments because learning moments are the opportunity to recognize how we learn from experiences, either positive or negative. You've got to have a heart of gold, but you also need to have a backbone of steel. Great leadership is a balance between being tough-minded and tender-hearted. You're actually a champion of hope. The world can be a better place. Micromanagement is absolutely not scalable. You and leaders, great servant leaders, absolutely do what they say they're going to do, so they build trust, and you actually treasure the gift of feedback. So there's the two comparisons between being this person, the soul-sucking CEO, and the servant leader.
Gee, when you're describing that soul-sucking CEO, you took me back to a past employment that I had, and I think, oh no, I'm going to have those nightmares again.
A lot of people react like that, George.
And yes, and it was, and that you were describing the situation perfectly, and that's some of those inner scars still haven't healed.
Well, you know what is interesting, and right now, as I coach CEOs, and I coach about 10 CEOs at the moment, one of the things that I've become very aware of, and I was kind of aware of this on the fringe, is that most leaders do not appreciate how their behavior actually impacts others. Now, I'm sure most leaders don't get up every morning and say, "Good morning, I'm Garry. I want to be the soul-sucking CEO today." However, they are not aware of the behaviors they have. So if we make them aware of the behaviors and then we have them intentionally try and move away from those behaviors, there's an amazing difference that happens for them and those they have the privilege to lead. So I think that's one of the things that is really important in asking those that are with us on this today, George, is are you aware of your leadership behavior? Now, there's a great book they can read if they want to, written by my friend Dr. Marshall Goldsmith. It's called What Got You Here Won't Get You There. And my whole coaching practice is based on a foundation of what got you here won't get you there. So go buy the book and from Marshall and read it and see how many of those 20 habits you have and what you can change.
Tell us about the stinky locker room and how do we know if we're spending enough time there?
Well, if you're spending too much time in that corner office with the door closed, you're not spending enough time in the stinky locker room. So, the thing about the stinky locker room, it really does show the people that you are aware of the key elements that build a great culture. And that number one is, do people in your organization know, feel, and are treated like they belong? So, the leader, spending time where they are, asking them what's on their mind, how are you today, what can I help you with? And then the second one is spending a lot of time with people, showing them that the work they do actually matters and makes a difference. Because people want to go to work every day. They want to make a contribution to something bigger than themselves. They want to learn something new. They want to be protected and set free by a compelling set of values. And if that's happening, they go home happy. And happy people build happy families. Happy families build happy communities. Happy communities build a happy world. And I think you would agree, George, a little happier world right now wouldn't be a bad thing. So not only is building a great culture in an organization going to benefit the organization in strength and financial stability, it's going to make a positive difference in the world, because if you can get 93% of your people engaged in your business and 98% of them saying, I love working at the company, they're going to go home happy, and there's a chance that their dinner table is going to be a little happier place than that grumpy person that comes home because they've had to deal with this person all day, which is what happens a lot. It's an absolute shame when you look at the decline in employee engagement. Employee engagement right now is at a all-time low. And, to think that over 70% of people who go to work every day are disengaged or actively disengaged, what sort of productivity is that producing in an organization? Well, about 30% of what it should, because only 30% of people are engaged. And, what is that doing to, the organizations? And again, it's this sort of behavior that's actually causing that to happen.
WD-40, it gets rid of squeaks and it loosens up bolts. How do you make something so simple, something so mundane, profound, and build a community around that?
Well, what you described is what the product, does, but what the product is a memory maker. And our purpose at WD-40 was we existed to create positive, lasting memories, solving problems in factories, homes, and workshops around the world. We solved problems and we created opportunities. So if you asked our people what business we're in, they would tell you we're in the memories business. Sure, we stopped squeaks. In my book, I talk about how your product should not become your purpose. So I think, again, the number one thing that leaders need to think about is, do you have a purpose in your organization that people, by working towards it, are making a contribution to something bigger than themselves? And, what's your worthy goal in the organization? A friend of mine, Michael Bungay Stainer, wrote a book called The Coaching Habit, and the second book just escaped me for a minute, but he talks about the worthy goal, and the first thing is it worth your life? Is it thrilling? Does it give you goosebumps? Is it important? Does it give more than it takes from the world? And also, is it daunting? Will it stretch you? And I think having a good purpose and a worthy goal in the organization does all those things. And the book I'm thinking about is called Where to Begin, is where he talks about that. So it's important to have a really strong purpose in the organization.
What were some of the most difficult conversations you had?
The most difficult conversations are where we protect our own comfort zone at the expense of other people's development. And that normally happens when we haven't clearly agreed between each other what I expect from you and what you expect from me. And that's the core of the book that I wrote with Ken Blanchard, is what does an A look like? If you and I are working together, George, we'd sit down at the beginning of the year and we'd say, here's what we want to achieve together. So what does an A look like? What does A performance look like? And if it walked in the room right now, what would it look like? And the most difficult conversations come about where there isn't clarity around that, because then you get into, well, that's not right. That's not what we didn't mean. So you get into that confrontation type conversation. So my guidance on that is, are you clear about what an A looks like? And then your job as the leader, the coach, is to help that person get that A.
If I'm working for you and I'm asking you, Garry, what would an A look like for me? What do I need to do? And you help me achieve that. Do I also get to say to you, as my leader, I want you to earn an A for me? And how do we do that?
Absolutely. As I said, it's what do you expect from me and what do I expect from you? It's a two-way street. Absolutely. So, we used to talk about that all the time. I used to ask the question, what can I do to be a better leader for you? It's interesting, when I used to do interviews for new people to join the company, I used to end the interview with, how could I have made this interview better?
Powerful question.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, did the answer to that question often have a big impact on your choice?
Yes. One is if they were brave enough to be able to help. And I must tell you, sometimes in interviews, I would do things that I would hope they would, at the end of the interview, call me on. And I'll give you an example. I was interviewing a guy one day, and he was going to be joining our quality team. So You would expect people in quality to, be who they are. And I staged that during the meeting, someone would call me and I would actually take the call. So I'm in the interview, in the meeting, and someone calls me. And I say, excuse me. And I took the call. It was a fake call. And then I blah, blah, and I hung up and I went on with the person. And at the end of the interview, I said to the person, how could I have been better for you? He said, I don't think you should have taken that phone call. This was about us. And I said, thank you for that. He actually got the job. And I told him later that I'd actually set that up because I wanted to see, in quality, you have to be brave enough to push back, right? So I didn't want someone who wasn't going to push back. So I told him later, do you know, I actually staged that to see if you would actually push back on me. And you did. Apart from the fact that, you had all the qualities, that was the defining moment that I said, that's the person we want.
What quality of the donkey was that?
Probably patience and persistence.
When when you introduced the concept of the donkey with the leadership quality, did people push back on that and say, "Come on, Garry, it's just a bloody donkey"?
Well, back then I probably didn't talk to them as if it was a donkey, but people did push back on, the attributes of servant leadership. Early in the time, I'd hear echoes in the background. He's drinking too much of Ken Blanchard's Kool-Aid. If we ignore this, it'll go away. Why should we, have to be open and accountable? I want to build. The only way I get power here is to keep things from people, not to share things with people. So, it took a little while, but over time, and again, we have to be consistent. Culture equals values plus behavior times consistency. And where a lot of organizations fail is they think you can sprinkle fairy dust on an organization and change the culture. No. I have a good friend of mine, his name's Charlie Maloof. He owns a chain of Ashley furniture stores out in Charlotte, North Carolina. And he said to me one day, Garry, culture is not a microwavable event. It takes a crockpot approach. And that is so true. We have to consistently look at the values and the behaviors that drive great cultures. And as leaders, we have to be brave enough to continue to ensure that we're watching that culture, to ensure that the toxins don't enter it. And we continue to breed that good culture over and over and over again. When I was a young lad back in Australia, my science teacher gave me a petri dish one day, and they said, we're going to grow culture in the petri dish. And the two most important things they said, George, was number one, what are the ingredients we put in the petri dish? And number two, you as the owner of the petri dish need to ensure you continually feed the good components of the culture, and you're brave enough to attack the toxins. Because if you're not brave enough to attack the toxins, it will destroy the culture in a nanosecond. And that's so true.
Wow, powerful phrase there. Yes, feed the positive and attack the toxins. As a CEO, you might have encountered toxins or toxic people within the organization. How did you best deal with them?
I shared them with a competitor. There's nothing worse than having someone in an organization that is a high performer but cultural cancer. Because number one, everyone else says, this is all garbage. If I'm the top sales performer, I can be the biggest, jerk in the world, because that's all they care about. So you might as well throw the whole thing out the window. So, I think that was an easy decision.
Share them with a competitor. What a fabulous approach. Garry, for people who'd like to know more about you, your books, and your services, they can find that at your website, and that's thelearningmoment.net. You can find that link in the description below, along with Garry's LinkedIn profile, where you can follow him for his insights. As we prepare to wrap up, imagine you are sitting with a new company leader. They've perhaps worked in the company for some time and now they are stepping into that top job. And they're looking for insight on how they can develop that culture, what maybe they can learn from the donkey. If you could offer them 1, 2, or 3 pieces of advice to start on the right foot and keep the momentum, what might be that advice?
Well, George, number one, it's not about you. It's about how you can bring out the best in others. Because your success is driven by your ability to have those you have the privilege to lead step into the best version of their personal self. So, you don't have all the answers. Deal with that. And wake up every day with one thing in mind. How do I help those I have the privilege to lead step into the best version of themselves? Become the forever learner and the forever teacher. And the coach.
Powerful advice. My guest today is Garry Ridge, reminding you that get out of that corner office and spend more time in that stinky locker room. If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.